provided similar training to those who are running Texas elections?
I would, absolutely, Lalo. You know, I had the privilege of taking the training for 8 different years that I served on city council and as mayor of Galveston. It's vital, it's critical. So what I would also say is I had an experience after Hurricane Ike, after losing a hard-fought state senate race, where the University of Texas Regents fired in the stroke of a pen 4,000 University of Texas medical branch employees. This was 6 to 8 weeks after losing everything they had in a horrible flood and hurricane. It was outrageous. Here's the thing. They did it in a illegal meeting in El Paso, of all places. You can't get much farther away from Galveston than that. And what I did is I filed it under the Texas Open Meetings Act, because you cannot hold a meeting in private to fire 4,000 people. It's only if the employee under consideration asks for it. So that has some significance, I think, for people to understand that I'm about transparency, and as an Attorney General, I will insist on that in all forms of government.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, same question.
The goal of the Open Meetings Act, as well as the Open Records Act, is to ensure transparency for Texans. Now, by executive order, Governor Abbott began to set aside some of those restrictions to make adjustments for the realities of COVID-19. Similar to voting, we found that those temporary restraints or those temporary modifications tended to lend itself to more participation, additional access to folks who normally wouldn't necessarily have access to those meetings, things like call-in or virtual participation. I would push to extend those provisions that were suspended September 1, so just last week. The executive orders that are in place were rescinded. But transparency is also a major reason that I decided to run. In each case that I've been involved in, be it Botham Jean, today is the 3-year anniversary of the murder of Botham Jean in his apartment in Dallas, Texas, to Marvin Scott, my most recent case, where we write for an opinion from the Attorney General's office that as civil attorneys, that we would have access to records, that we could prepare our suit, that we can provide answers to the family. And each time the Attorney General's office has denied access to that information, citing ongoing investigative purposes. However, and this is from my conversations with Chief McGraw, Steve McGraw of the Texas State Troopers, it can't be that it is only necessary, it only serves an investigative purpose to withhold that information from the public when it inculpates law enforcement officers, and then it's readily available when it exculpates officers.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Merritt, this is going to come right back to you. What, in your view, can the AG's office do regarding oversight of ERCOT and utility companies? And what is your position on ERCOT being exempt from open records requirements?
Well, ERCOT has been run in sort of in the true conservative Texas fashion of regulations be damned. We cannot continue to allow that. The Attorney General's office, under my leadership, it will serve as a watchdog that will ensure that the companies that we allow the power systems to come through are prepared for the realities of global warming and of climate change. And we also need to begin to consider different alternatives for getting Texans access to power in cases of inclement weather. Texas is strongly energy independent, but there is a South Cross opportunity for Texas to begin to exchange power with other states, as well as other inroads to participate in a system that allows for Texas the surety of having access to energy during times of crisis. While we are proud to be Texans and to be the energy capital of the world, we cannot continue a system of unabated capitalism where corporations are allowed to run ripshod on Texas taxpayers.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski, same question.
Yes, Lalo. It's incredible that it's having it both ways over at ERCOT. They're exempt from open records because they're a private nonprofit, but then they assert governmental immunity when they're sued for death, for wrongful death. You know, it's just incredible. And here's what Ken Paxton did last year, September, a year ago, in Panda Energy. Panda sued ERCOT for negligent misrepresentation of promises that there would be a stream of income if they just would build some coal plants. They sued, they won in the local court, in the district court, but they lost in the appellate court. When it got to the Texas Supreme Court, Ken Paxton filed an amicus brief. No one asked him to do it. He didn't have to do it, but he filed an amicus brief supporting ERCOT's assertion of governmental or sovereign immunity. That's a big difference between me and Mr. Paxton. I would certainly not do that. The people's lawyer would not do that.
Thank you. Next question, and so after this, each candidate will get a chance to ask the other. So hope you have your questions prepped, gentlemen. How can the AG's office help improve the criminal justice system in Texas, from police standards of practice to holding DAs and police departments accountable for their actions, including in dealing with things such as prosecutorial misconduct and no-knock warrants?
Lalo, I think you have it going to me, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, first off, it's incredible that there's not a civil rights division in the Texas Attorney General's office. There used to be, and the last time there was, it was a Democrat in the office, Dan Morales. Mr. Merritt and I had the opportunity to be on a Zoom call with the Democratic Attorneys General Association, Keith Ellison, a perfect example of a civil rights icon working as a Attorney General. And what I would say is that while Texas's statutes are a little differently, we can have a civil rights division in the Attorney General's office. So that's number one. Number two, Lalo, I think what you can do is be a thought leader. You may not be able to pass laws like the legislature, but that didn't stop John Hill in 1972 from advocating for a civil fraud statute that would later become the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. He couldn't pass it, but he argued for it as a candidate. When he won, he was the first witness in front of the Senate Business and Commerce Committee. So start a civil rights division, staff it with excellent attorneys, and be an advocate, and start getting around the state and having meetings with law enforcement and district attorneys so that there can be criminal and social justice reform.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, same question.
You know, over the years representing families of police violence in Texas, I've had an opportunity to work with both prosecutors and law enforcement officials, from the Texas Rangers to Texas State Troopers. And I like to emphasize my relationship with Chief Stephen McGraw, head of the Texas State Troopers, just because it was an unlikely relationship. We were typically at odds with each other. But as we began to talk and we found common ground on raising sort of tough daughters, his daughter is a Black Hawks operator in Afghanistan, or was, I should say. And my daughter is an all-star on the basketball team at 9 years old. And what we discovered was we didn't have that much that separated us. We cared about the same things. We wanted communities in Texas to be safer. And we had similar strategies. And it wasn't back to blue versus Black Lives Matter. In fact, Governor Greg Abbott identified that there is an ongoing mental health crisis that's been exacerbated by COVID-19 and the pandemic. And that mental health crisis is not a law enforcement problem, but we've given law enforcement the only responsibility to deal with it. And they have dealt with depression rates, low retention rates, hyper-suicide rates, because of the overwhelming task that we've given them. And we haven't taken the time to properly invest in mental health infrastructure, hiring mental health workers, developing mental health departments for major cities like Bexar County, where so many of our veterans suffer from PTSD and are looking for opportunities to become meaningful members of society. We have failed, we've failed Texas law enforcement and the people, and I think we can work closer together.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, I'm coming right back to you. Your question for Mr. Jaworski.
Mr. Jaworski, I know that you served as a mayor of Galveston during an important humanitarian crisis. Can you talk to us a bit about how your experience there has prepared you for what Texas is facing with not only the ongoing crisis but recovery to the pandemic?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, Mr. Merritt. When I was mayor pro tem, before I was mayor, Hurricane Rita, Category 5, was bearing down on us, and Jack Colley, the Texas Department of Emergency Management icon, was the one guiding us. I'll never forget it. We really thought we were going to die or have a good chance of it. So the mayor, and I was her assistant, the mayor pro tem, we put in emergency powers, and so we actually were thinking about compassionate ways to exercise that power, like letting people leave public housing or the island with their animals in the buses, as opposed to making them have a horrible choice of leaving their animals behind. When I was mayor of Galveston, rebuilding public housing was a very essential thing to do, since housing and urban development gave us almost $1 billion, and it was important that we spend it on public housing rebuilding. Otherwise, it would be clawed back and we'd go bankrupt. Some people didn't like that, but I fought for it. It cost me my re-election, but 10 days before the runoff was concluded, I made sure we signed the notices to proceed. It's one of those do the right thing and suffer the consequences. Now it's 100% occupied, and I'm going to be at the groundbreaking for the 3rd neighborhood next week.
Good stuff, good stuff. Thank you for your question, Mr. Merritt. Mr. Jaworski, your question for Mr. Merritt.
Absolutely. Mr. Merritt, this is something I've struggled with, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. You know, the state of Texas has 30 million citizens, and its government over 200 agencies, some with conflicting interests and missions. The Attorney General is responsible for representing the state, but we also want to be the people's attorney. So, in your opinion, who is the AG's client, and how would you handle the routine conflicts between your duty to represent the state and your being the people's lawyer?
Thank you again for that question, and I certainly understand and appreciate that state agencies and state actors don't always serve the people of Texas, but each role, anybody who takes the oath of office, their primary responsibility is to figure out how to best serve Texans. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a real conflict. Now, has it been a conflict in actuality? Is there a conflict in the suits if the people of Texas have been injured by a Texas state actor? It gives the appearance of a conflict, but the truth is, ultimately, our goal should be what is best for the people of Texas. And so the short answer to your question is, my chief client is the people of Texas, the people. Now, it's our responsibility to ensure that the government continues to operate, that there's a sense of knowingness, that if the government officials, if my office takes on a task, that you can stand by it, that it won't be undermined by the whim of an individual. And so my allegiance in that regard, when we start talking about the specific task, is to the government function that serves the people, but ultimately that function must serve the interests of the individual Texan.
Thank you. Thank you both gentlemen for some great, insightful questions. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. This question now goes back to you, Mr. Merritt. You've referenced this in some of your earlier comments. You know, over the past 18 months, we've witnessed this governor increasing the amassed power, essentially by asserting what some call this implicit omnibus authority on the emergency declaration. In some cases, usurping legislative authority, some might argue, and most recently, vetoing legislative funding. What role can the AG's office play in maintaining a check on executive authority? And what happens if in the future, the governor elects to veto judicial or AG funding?
I'll start with what role I can play as Attorney General to serve as a check. Now, the simple role that the Attorney General will play would be to offer robust and legally sound memorandums of law to the governor's office, which I don't think Governor Abbott has had to deal with, or even the 87th legislator. So much of what the governor has done in his gubernatorial overreach and the legislator has done is as if they have no counsel, right? No general counsel's office like we know exists within the AG's office to advise them on the parameters of the Constitution. And certainly when they're in violation of the Constitution, my office will be proactive in filing for injunctive relief within the courts to prevent the overreach. And I think a great example is here near my home city. in Dallas County where local officials have made certain decisions, and I appreciate Mr. Jaworski mentioned this earlier. Local officials have made certain decisions on behalf of the people within their counties. In Texas, we brag about the importance of local leadership, how we don't want big government, but we want people to lead from a local level. But the governor has come in and tried, for example, to ban mask mandates in areas where local leadership wants it, where communities want it. I would come in and file injunctive relief on behalf and be an advocate for local leaders, as well as upfront letting them know that the decisions that they're making, when they're not legally sound, where they falter, what ways they can be improved, and forewarning them of future action.
Mr. Jaworski, same question.
Lalu, this is a great platform so that I can say the following. I think the best thing for Texas, if we're not going to get a blue wave, and hopefully we will, but even if we don't, the best thing for Texas is to have a check and balance on this GOP team. It's like a football game where there's only one team on the field. Or even a better metaphor would be, it's just a game where there's a penalty flag on every play. I get the feeling that there's a little hypocrisy here with the Texas GOP. You'll remember about a year ago, the legislature was demanding a special session so that they could check Greg Abbott's unabated executive authority. Well, now that they have all these special sessions, or they had a
grab me another bottle of water,
they haven't done a thing about it. And so now they're all just sort of circling the wagons so that the primary base is taken care of. If you had an opportunity to read my op-ed that I published about 2 weeks ago, I called out Governor Abbott for abusing his executive authority under the Texas Disaster Act of 1975. Mr. Merritt just asked about the experience I had as Mayor Pro Tem and Mayor, but basically, Mr. Abbott has a framework to save Texas, and he's not taking action. Well, that's his call, but he can't limit others to offer aid or call to others who can give it.
Thank you. Next question, and I'm coming right back to you, Mr. Jaworski. We talked a little bit earlier about the role of the people's lawyer, so if we can delve a bit more specifically, and I know you had some examples to share, but how can the AG's office affirm privacy protections for Texans from technology companies, which include but are not limited to things like smart thermostats that were alleged to have been being altered during Winter Storm Uri, to Alexa and other types of devices. Additionally, how would you or your office as AG work to combat discriminatory effects of emerging technologies, or not even emerging, existing technologies such as artificial intelligence and AI, as well as facial recognition software, particularly within the context of law enforcement?
And that's a mouthful, but I think I could do it. Well, first off, let me just say social media is great. It's a global phenomenon, and in some way, it is the most harmful invention in modern history. But as it pertains to I'll work with attorneys general throughout the country, not in Texas. And I'm telling you,
For some reason, we're having a very hard time hearing you. I don't know what happened.
okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It's a little better, so I'll restart.
Okay.
But we
All right.
just like faded out pretty badly there.
Wow. Okay, we're back though. Huh?
Yeah, you're back. Yes.
Okay. Well, let me say, maybe I can start over
Sure.
if that's okay. I would just say social media is a great thing. It is a real godsend, and in some ways it's probably the worst thing that's happened in modern history. But as it pertains to Texans' privacy and consumer protection rights, you're asking the right question. The Attorney General has a obligation, I think, to read the fine print, make sure that the disclaimers are not against public policy, because people just want to get online, right? And then they just blow past what Facebook is writing, or Twitter, or the smart thermometers. But let me just tell you that when illegal data harvesting occurs, it is up to the Attorney General, and you can work with all the others throughout the country. Now, on discriminatory effects of AI, it is absolutely within our rights to sue in federal court or state court if possible. But you would use such U.S. laws as the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the EEOC even has guidelines that we can use to alleviate the discriminatory effects of AI and facial recognition software. We've all heard the horror stories about some of the Facebook mistakes, and it's just purely racist. And of course, if it's unintentional, that's one thing. But if it's intentional conduct, then obviously that would be subject to great legal jeopardy, and the Attorney General is the one to bring that action.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, since it was such a mouthful, we gave Mr. Jaworski 90 seconds. You have the say, because I know it's a lot, but we wanted to kind of tie it all together.
Sure. I think the answer is to ask the experts. This is a rapidly evolving field, and particularly in the area of law enforcement, it's been fairly well documented and demonstrated that some of the facial recognition software and the other software being used has a disproportionate impact on African American communities or communities of color, and it's being used as an additional mechanism of criminalizing these communities. However, I think there's an opportunity here, and I'm excited about the investment of Black tech and other tech throughout Texas. We want their presence here. We want to see that new market grow in Texas. We think it has a home in Texas. Texas leads the nation in all other areas, but we want to make sure that it's rolled out in an equitable manner. I'm looking forward to working with law enforcement to find ways to use tech to limit police officer encounters, particularly in traffic stops. In other situations that doesn't call for an officer to put himself in harm's way. In these, what are called routine, and law enforcement officer will tell you there's no routine traffic stop. But these routine traffic stops are potentially dangerous. But it's important to protect the privacy rights of Texans. We need to follow, and I know Texas, and particularly Texas conservatives, hate this idea, but we need to follow the federal regulations. We need to work with other attorney generals throughout the country, and I appreciate Mr. Jaworski mentioning our meeting with DAG of the Democratic Association of Attorney Generals. We need to figure out what's working best in Silicon Valley, who's had a chance to deal with this kind of technology.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt, because I'm coming right back to you.
Okay.
Recognizing that a change in the political party affiliation of the Attorney General's office will cause a significant organization and leadership change from culture and other perspectives. But what steps would you take to ensure that the Office of the Attorney General moving forward will be still capable of really representing all Texans of all legitimate political and ideological beliefs?
Yeah, I think we've seen greater partisanism within the Texas Attorney General office under Ken Paxton, who has abused really the office of Texas Attorney General to push forward a Trump agenda, everything from the myth of voter fraud to support for racist immigration policies. The Texas Attorney General is primarily a consumer protections agency, among other things. It's a wide office with over 4,000 employees. But as a consumer protector, we need to take on the property taxes in Texas that are 20% higher than the rest of the country. That's not a partisan issue. We need to take on ensuring access to power through our power grid system. We need to take on school funding, all of these things that will improve the lives of Texans, that will focus on the consumer protections aspect of the position, and that doesn't go down party lines. I think those should be the major issues that we address from the AG's office.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski, same question.
Sure, Lalo. I mean, there's a big difference between me and Ken Paxton. He's embattled, I am not. And so what that means is I can actually go out and visit campuses without fear of being, yelled at or picketed and protested. He's indicted, he's investigated, he is not a popular guy, but his, safe place is to go on Maria Bartiromo and Fox News. This is not what the people's lawyers should be doing. He's actually, it appears, intentionally looking for ways to divide us. I like the idea, instead of starting with appointing a cabinet which he had the opportunity to do since he fired his entire cabinet, but to appoint a new cabinet that looks like the face of Texas, men and women, white and of color. And then going out and hitting the schools, the law schools, the colleges, even high schools, and really encouraging the youth to look at public service as a noble cause. That would also cause me to be out in rural Texas and urban Texas and meet people where they are and find out what they need and be able to say to them, hey folks, your attorney has arrived.
Thank you. Right back at you, Mr. Jaworski. To slightly change the topic, what role can the AG's office play? We've talked about consumer protection, but another element of that is when it comes to ensuring enforcement of environmental regulations and protecting vulnerable communities from the disproportionate impact of industrial pollution and climate change.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to someone who's doing it right. Christian Menifee, Harris County attorney, who, by the way, was at Fulbright Jaworski and then obviously was trained as a great trial lawyer there. And now he's a very popular county-wide elected official. And, you know, you got to be proud to see the next generation of leadership doing so well. Imagine if a state attorney general weren't hostile to Harris County. Now, that's a heck of a thought. Imagine an attorney general who would actually empower local decision-making authority. As a former mayor, that means something to me. And so I would actually, you know, assist, defer, whatever word you want to use, work with county officials to clean up the Houston Ship Channel. You know, if they didn't do it themselves, then certainly the Texas Attorney General has a storied career of being an environmental protection agency. Just look at John Hill and his great Assistant Attorney General Terry O'Rourke. So the AG can actually do it themselves, but why wouldn't you help local county attorneys?
Mr. Merritt, same question.
We have to first deal with the reality that one of the greatest injustices suffered by marginalized communities in Texas is environmental injustice. That Black and brown communities are impacted by waste and proximity to power lines and things that impact community health on a regular basis. We need to first deal with that reality and begin systemically addressing it with specific policies geared towards curing this crisis. We need to take global warming and climate change seriously. We need to listen to the science, tap into the federal market that is taking on some of these issues, and join the 21st century in dealing with a rapidly changing reality in America. You know, as a civil rights attorney, one of the first cases that I took in Texas was that of Nichols Middle School, which was a toxic school that was causing children to be sick, with over 67 active complaints of people being brought out that school. And what I found was an environmental or a natural gas industry that would come down hard on people who were complaining about being sick, as opposed to actually dealing with the issue. As Texas Attorney General, I would take that task on full speed.
Right back at you, Mr. Merritt. Recently at the Senate State Affairs Committee, the Attorney General's chief of the Election Integrity Unit testified that while his office enjoyed a robust working relationship with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office, no such relationship existed with Harris County District Attorney. What steps would you take to ensure that the AG's office has a relationship with District Attorney's offices across all 254 counties?
Particularly as it relates to election integrity, as the question began, we need a cohesive plan for ensuring fair and highly participated in elections across the state of Texas. And part of that is the second answer, part of your question, which is fostering relationships between local officials, from the prosecutor's office to election officials throughout the regions. You foster those relationships in part by what Mr. Jaworski said earlier, which is not being so embattled, not being so polarized between red or blue, left or right, but being accessible. But I think it's time in Texas that we begin to set up commissions, because there are certain aspects of the Texas prosecutorial community that has failed Texas for too long. We need commissions to investigate, to research, to come up with specific strategies to remedy these long-term ill effects. We've begun to do that in my program, the Grassroots Law Project, where we set up commissions with prosecutors from San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Boston. I will bring something similar to the Texas Attorney General's office, these commissions designed to address long-term ills within our communities.
Same question, Mr. Jaworski.
Lalu, I bet he's got a good relationship with the Montgomery County DA, because, you know, that's where Ken Paxton is prosecuting Curtis Rogers for his alleged voter fraud. You know, it's just incredible that he would do that. You remember Mr. Rogers, the gentleman who was so proud that he stood in line for 4 to 6 hours so that he could vote. He was the exact example of the sort of guy I want to protect, who stands in line. Now, as it turns out, there was some snafu with his length of probation, and Ken Paxton just seizes on it. So, of course, he's got a relationship with Montgomery County because that's a very white county, and it would be appropriate in Ken Paxton's globe and world to prosecute a man there. It's just what they're doing with Zena Stevens, the excellent sheriff in Jefferson County, suing her for a mistake in Chambers County. So this is a real practice. Mr. Merritt and I would never do such a thing. We would have a relationship with all 254 counties. This is further evidence of Mr. Paxton's culture war, and it's got to come to an end.
Right back to you, Mr. Jaworski. What oversight measures would you put in place to ensure that the billions of dollars that are coming down in federal funds from the Biden administration are not only spent properly but well accounted for?
Well, certainly the Attorney General has to be the general counsel of the state, and it would be appropriate to be involved in all the high-level meetings. I would imagine the comptroller and the governor's office have a lot to say about where that money goes, but we'll remember that after Hurricane Ike, when $3 billion came to Louisiana and Texas from Housing and Urban Development for 3 different hurricanes, Rick Perry, who was in a very hot election with Bill White in 2010, was spreading that money around rural Texas where it wasn't needed instead of urban Texas. George P. Bush did the same thing after Hurricane Harvey. An aggressive and timely and present Attorney General would never let something like that happen. So that's why you need to be in the meetings and make sure that money that's dedicated for low-income needs stays in the communities where it's supposed to be.
Mr. Merritt?
You know, in addition to being in the meetings as was laid out, it's so important that we are transparent with where the money is going, that we're held accountable to the public, which means we have to make that information accessible to the public. You know, I was raised in a Kojic church, and so in a Kojic church, you tend to have the church finance meeting where the congregation sits down and says, hey, all your tithe money, this is exactly where it's going. I think we need to set up similar access, and while those exist, I think that we need to begin to use some of the things, again, that we saw a lot of, for example, the Open Records or the Open Meetings Act adjustments for COVID-19 to make it more available virtually, that we set up these meetings, these budget finance meetings about Texas when federal funds come in, where the people will have a say about where that money goes, where they will get to monitor how that money is being spent in ways in which it can be spread more equitably throughout Texas.
Hey, I'm going to shorten this down to about 30-second responses now on just a few quick topics. Rural Texas. For years, it feels like Texas Democrats have abandoned rural Texas. What would your campaign strategy be, Mr. Merritt, in engaging rural Texas on the importance of the AG's office?
Well, it comes down to showing up. It's important. The reason that rural Texas often feel left out because Texas is so big and we focus on some of the larger population centers. That doesn't mean that we can't address the issues that are germane to rural Texas, that we can't address regulation of farmlands and of access to things that they need to recover from changing demographics within the agricultural landscape in Texas.
Mr. Jaworski?
Yeah, I've visited any number of rural communities in the last year, and what I say is cannabis remember that 100 years ago, if you dare to grow grapes and make wine, you go to prison. Well, now I would ask you to drive from Houston to Fredericksburg up 290, and you'll see like 50 wineries. It is a cash crop. It's a tourist draw. The same can be done with cannabis. Number two, we need to be an aggressive general counsel and make sure the legislature keeps fast to its promise to issue broadband all throughout rural as well as urban Texas, because people need it for telemedicine and remote learning. And then finally, Medicare drawdown. You have to be an advocate for it so that we can sustain our vital network of rural hospitals.
Mr. Jaworski, right back to you. What interactions have you and your campaign already had with disenfranchised community leaders, churches, organizations, and what's the diversity of your campaign team?
Right. So the main part of my campaign team are two husband and wives, and they're white. But every opportunity we have, we in communities are associating with churches. In Tyler, Texas, we worked with some great African-American church community leaders. Down in the south of Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, we have worked with any number of local officials, all of whom are Latinos or Latinas. In fact, our political director is a Latina. We look for opportunities any chance we have. But as a white man, I understand that nothing I say or do, other than being a good member of a larger global community, is going to change things. I need to be mindful of my limitations, but also be a good listener, which as a mediator, I am trained to do. So I just want you to know that as an Attorney General, I will make sure that my cabinet reflects the face of Texas and that we are constantly mindful of the shortcomings of how America dealt with race.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
Our campaign is what I consider a movement campaign. Our campaign was built out of a movement in Texas. After years of working with the Texas Organizing Project that serves the needs of marginalized communities, after building out the Grassroots Law Project that emphasizes in both the firm aspect of the work that we do and the volunteer aspect of the work that we do, our whole goal is to build community. And our goal in running for Texas Attorney General is to put the marginalized issues on the ballot, not only the Black community and not only racial diversity, but class diversity, poverty diversity, and access to all Texans to seats of power in government.
Gentlemen, thank you both so very much. This has been an enlightening, insightful, engaging debate. I wish we had more time to continue on the interest of the promises we made to both of your campaigns. I'm going to get you out of here in time, so we're going to go with 2-minute closes for each one of you, since Mr. Merritt just got done talking and he had the first question. Mr. Jaworski, you get to close first.
You got it, Lalu.
And it's 2 minutes, so.
Yeah, a little extra. Well, let me refer to you then in your official capacity, Mr. Davies. Thank you so much this evening. And Chairman Robinson and the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats for producing this evening's debate between myself and my friend, Mr. Merritt. And let me say this to you, Mr. Merritt, thank you for being an advocate for positive change in Texas. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Texas voters, let me speak directly to you. We are bound together as a force for change. We are a team. You and I, we are going to win the race for the Texas Attorney General's office in 2022. My first comments at the beginning of the evening sounded pretty dire, but this is all good news, and I want you to feel hopeful. What we'll witness in the coming year on the Texas GOP side is completely different than what you witnessed with me and Mr. Merritt this evening. Because what the GOP will present to Texas voters is a masterpiece of shame. A GOP primary featuring a criminally indicted FBI and state bar investigated career office holder, an ideologue posing as a trial lawyer who is the enemy of the people of this state. Even his GOP opponents think so. So when Ken Paxton, George Bush, and Justice Guzman collectively raise and spend $35 million cutting each other up, and Paxton emerges after a summer runoff, bloody and broke, he won't have sufficient time to rehabilitate his Trump-endorsed far-right message to attract anything other than his base. Meantime, your support and that of
Yo, what's up? This is your boy Mickey Cartel, and you had just listened to the debate with Jaworski and Attorney Lee Merritt for Attorney General 2022. I want to encourage everybody to come out to vote. I want to encourage everybody to visit the store, and if you down with my bro Lee Merritt, we support Lee Merritt 100%. If you down with him like I'm down with him, just come over here to our side, man. We can use all the support we can get, you know. And we still out here fundraising. If you have any events that you would need Lee Merritt to attend to, you can always hit my inbox, and I'll make sure to get it to him, put it on his calendar, do whatever we got to do. We trying to get all the votes, all the people. If you rocking with us, you know what I'm saying, black, white, Latinos, everybody. You know what I'm saying? If you rocking with us, you rock with us, man. And y'all make sure y'all follow the Heart Check Store apparel, man. If y'all need t-shirts, memorabilia, anything like that, that's on Instagram, Heart Check Store. I'm Mickey Cartel, and I appreciate you guys spending the time that you spent with us. I know it was a long debate, but wasn't it informal? Did you learn anything? And y'all make sure y'all get in my follow me on Instagram at the Dead Homies Podcast, and let's talk about it. Until we meet again, I'm Mickey Cartel, and I'm out.
Yo, what's up? It's your boy Mickey Cartel, and you're now tuned to another episode of the Dead Homies and Enemies Podcast. And on this segment, I like to say free Marvin Gaye. I'll say it again, y'all. Free Marvin Gaye. Have you guys heard the story of this guy named Russell King from Texas? He shot a state trooper that was trying to pull him over, put the state trooper in a high-speed chase, all the way back home to his house, pulled up in his house. The state trooper knocked on his door, and this man, Russell King, shot this trooper. Bah! Shot him. He went to trial for it and beat the case. Man who shot Texas state trooper faces no charges. The homeowner says he had no idea he shot a state trooper when he fired through his front door. You know, kudos to this man, but what about Marvin Gaye? Do you guys know the story of Marvin Gaye? He did the same thing. Marvin Gaye was to Killeen, Texas. Shot through his door, not knowing who was that banging at his door. They had a no-knock warrant, and it was for the wrong house. But he's been sitting on death row for 7 years, or shall I say prison for 7 years. No trial. Denton County grand jury declined charging Russell King, but in Killeen, Texas, Marvin Gaye has spent 7 years awaiting trial from a no-knock raid. Prosecutors want capital punishment. His bond is set at $4 million. Know what I mean? That's I'm calling because somebody just sent me a message. I'm calling because Marvin Lewis Gaye has been incarcerated for 7 years without a trial, and he faces the death penalty. Police in Killeen, Texas executed a reckless no-knock raid on his home in 2014 based on the bad testimony of an informant. Police broke into his house, and he responded like anyone bearing arms would to defend themselves. He did not know that police were conducting a no-knock raid because there was no reason to. He had no drugs in his home. We need Bell County District Attorney Henry Garza to drop the charges. 7 years in jail is an abomination. That's some bullshit, bruh. Listen to the story of Russell King, and then we're gonna compare it to the Marvin Gaye story.
Hey, please! No! pulled up in front of my house. Hold on. I am the resident. Okay, I don't know. He followed me here. That's why I shot him through the fucking door.
Shot him through the fucking door. That's crazy though, man. Shot the police through the door, man. But they ain't talking about this case though. They ain't talking about Russell King case because the media don't want to talk about that. They know when they giving favoritism and when they corrupt, and they know, man, and they know that we dealing with the Marvin Gaye thing. They don't want to put too much attention on Russell King because we all know that that's white man's justice right there, because Marvin Gaye did the same exact thing, except Marvin Gaye's victim died. I think that's the difference. The cop Marvin Gaye shot died. This cop didn't die. Yeah, man, what do y'all think? I'm trying to look for the story of Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye case still awaiting trial 7 years later. 7 years later, still awaiting trial.
In tonight's top story, a group of protesters gathered outside the Bell County Justice Center tonight to draw attention to Marvin Gaye's case. Gaye is accused of killing a Killeen police detective while being served a no-knock warrant back in 2014. 6 News reporter Cole Johnson explains what the protesters want to see change.
The time is now that we bring justice to free Marvin Gaye, and we end no knock for good.
Garrett Galloway calling for justice in his brother Marvin Gaye's case. Gaye is accused of killing Killeen police detective Charles Dinwiddie back in 2014, while police served a no-knock warrant for his arrest. Tuesday, a small protest was held outside the Bell County Justice Center, where Galloway argued Gaye was defending himself.
I believe that Marvin was in his rights to protect his home.
During the protest, Galloway explained what justice looks like in his eyes.
Justice to me would be freeing him. Let's get this trial moving and let's free him.
Galloway mentioned other groups as part of the protest, including the Proud Boys. It's a far-right group that's gained national attention following the first presidential debate.
We got the Proud Boys here, so they're standing back and they're standing with us, and they're going to stand by with us.
Also, the Elmer Geronimo Pratt Pistol and Rifle Club of Central Texas. According to the group's Facebook page, it's for the advocacy of Black Americans exercising their Second Amendment right. Nick Bezel with the group claims some of Gaye's constitutional rights were violated.
6 years is not a fair and speedy trial by any means, which is a violation of the Sixth Amendment right.
For where the case stands right now, according to the court coordinator for District 27 and DA Henry Garza, there's a status hearing scheduled for December 9th. Reporting in Bell County, Cole Johnson, 6 News.
And while a status hearing...
Yeah, shout out to Nick Bezel, shout out to the Harry P. Newton Gun Club, shout out to Marvin Gaye's family, shout out to his brothers, man, shout out to his mom, dad, everybody out there that's supporting Marvin Gaye. I want you guys to continue supporting Marvin Gaye. Hashtag this podcast, free Marvin Gaye, and justice for Marvin Gaye. And that's all I gotta say about that, man. Shout out to Nick though. Look, bro. I told you when you came at me in Killeen, Texas, and you asked us to hook you up with the Grassroots Law Project. Remember, your boy Mickey Cartel did that. Free Marvin Gaye. On my mama, dead homies.